Hello listeners and viewers. Welcome to Kaduna State Ministry of Education Radio and TV e-learning program designed for our SS3 and other students staying at home due to the coronavirus pandemic. The present administration, under the able leadership of His Excellency, Malam Nasir Ahmed El-Rufai, is positioned as always to ensure that under his leadership, our students are not left behind in all areas of human endeavors, especially education. Kaduna State is the center of learning. Therefore, we want to ensure that our students excel in their forthcoming examinations and beyond. Students and other learners at home are given this opportunity in order to continue learning, as education is a continuous process. Different subjects will be taught in this program to assist students to perform excellently in the forthcoming Senior School Certificate examination being conducted by NECO and WAEC as soon as schools reopen. Teachers making presentations will always provide their names and phone numbers during each presentation, and they can be contacted for questions, further explanations, and/or clarifications. The following numbers and contacts can also be reached for expression of any concern or observation: 090-865-00545 or 080-383-62072. Our website is www.education.kdsg.gov.ng. Our email education@kdsg.gov.ng or education.kdsg@gmail.com. Our YouTube channel, Ministry of Education, Kaduna State. Our Twitter handle @Kaduna_MOE. Or our Facebook page, Ministry of Education, Kaduna State. Stay safe, stay at home, and learn well. Thank you, happy listening, and happy viewing.
Good day, learners and viewers at home. My name is knYARI ZACHARIAH. You are welcome to another section of Commons e-learning organized by Kaduna State Ministry of Education. Our today's topic is occupation. In this lesson, we are going to consider the following: definition of occupation, factors determine the types of occupation, classifications of occupation or classes of productive occupation, summary, and assignment. Before we go into the topic proper, I may like to ask you the following question: what does your father do to earn a living? What does your father do or your mother does to earn a living? Why do people engage in different kind of work? Why do people engage in different kind of work? In most cases, whenever you are filling a form, you will be asked of your father's or your mother's occupation. What does that mean? How do you normally fill those forms? The answer is that your father's occupation in which you are asked to fill in any given form, it is the work that your father does or your mother does. Therefore, we are going to look at what occupation is all about. Occupation can simply be defined as any productive or legitimate activities in which people engage themselves in order to earn a living. By occupation, it simply means work somebody does to earn a living. By occupation, it simply means work somebody does to earn a living. Today, people engage in various economic activities to earn a living and to satisfy their numerous wants. When you look at it in every given society, people are engaged in different works. People are engaged in different economic activities, and the aim is to earn a living. Why? Because human wants are unlimited, but the resources to satisfy our wants are limited. Therefore, there is a need for people to engage in one economic activity or the other. there is a need for people to do one particular job or the other with the aim of what? Of earning a living. Since we cannot be able to satisfy our need, there is a need for us to engage ourselves in different aspects of work. Now, why do people do different kind of job? Why do people do different kind of job? When you look at the society today, people are not doing the same work. People are engaged in doing different types of work. The reason it is because people have different skills. People have different skills, and by skill here, it simply refers to the ability to do a particular work very well. By skill, it simply means the ability to do a particular work very well. Now, we are going to look at factors that determine the choice or the types of an occupation. Factors that determine the types of an occupation. There are so many factors that determine the types of an occupation. Before you will find yourself doing a particular work, there are factors that may either compel you in one way or the other to do a particular work. These are the factors we are going to look at. 1, we have climatic and weather differences. 2, we have salaries and wages. 3, we have natural resources. 4, we have education, skill, and training. 5, we have industrial hazard. 6, we have government policy. Therefore, we are going to look at this factor one after the other. We are going to consider this factor one after the other. The first factor that determines the choice of an occupation is climatic and weather differences. Climatic and weather condition of a place determine the nature of occupation available in a particular area. For example, fishermen will be many in riverine areas. This level of the climatic condition of a particular place determine the kind of work that people may engage themselves in order to earn a living. 2, we have salaries and wages. The remuneration and condition of services attached to a particular occupation determine the number of people that will be interested in such an occupation. Of course, it is always true. People are forced to go into one occupation or the other, even when they don't have interest on it, because of the wage, because of the reward that they will receive at the end of the day. There are some particular work in our country today that people don't want to go into it because the wage is very low, because the salary is not attractive. Number 3, we have natural resources. This implies that the availability of natural resources thus affects the choice of occupation of a people. For example, miners will be many in an area where there are what? Mineral resources. Availability of natural resources determine the choice of occupation. Where the natural resources are available, that will determine the nature of work that people may engage themselves in order to earn a living. The 4th factors that determine the choice of occupation is education, skill, and training. People are engaged in occupation in which they have education, skill, and training. Therefore, education, skill, and training can also affect the type of occupation. This is why a trained medical doctor engaged in rendering medical services, while unskilled workers are many in extractive industries or extractive occupation. The level of skill you acquire, the level of professionalism you have can determine the nature of work that you will do to earn a living. It is true, I am a teacher. I have been trained, I'm a trained teacher, and that is why I am doing a teaching job. So teaching is my occupation. The skill, the ability for you to do something very well can also determine the types of occupation or the type of work that you will be doing. So education, skill, and training received by people determine the choice of their occupation. The 5th factor that determines the choice of occupation is industrial hazard. The risks and security involved in such employment also determine people's involvement in an occupation. Of course, it is always true, because the risk and security, if the risk is less, we will attract more people to such an occupation. But if there is high risk involved in a particular occupation, people may tend to run away from such a particular work. So it is indeed a great factor that determines the choice of an occupation. The sixth one is government policies. Government policy. The policies of government as well as the age of the person seeking employment also determine the types of occupation. It is this factor, it is always done practically in our country today, because those job seekers, one of the factors that detach them from applying for a particular job, it is the age limit. Whenever they are making an advertisement about a job vacancy, the first prerequisite, it is always age. If you are above a particular age level, it means you are not qualified to apply for such a particular job. Therefore, this has become a great factor that determines the choice of occupation, especially or particularly in our own country today. Now, the next thing we are going to consider in this lesson is classification of occupation. Classification of occupation. And I will continue to ask you this question. I will continue to ask you this very particular question. Learners, why do people do different kind of work? Why do people do different kinds of work? Now, that gives birth to what we call it the classification of occupation, because under the classes or the classification of occupation, you will come to understand that people are involved in different economic activities in order to earn a living. Occupation is classified into the following. 1, we have extractive occupation. 2, we have manufacturing occupation. 3, we have constructive occupation. 4, we have commercial occupation. 5, we have direct service. And 6, we have indirect service. Therefore, we are going to look at these classes of occupation one after the other. Extractive occupation. By extractive occupation, it means the category of people that are involved or whose economic activities are directed at the process of bringing out the natural resources from the soil or from the land. There are people in our society whose economic activities is based on bringing the natural resources from the soil or from the land. Learners, I want you to put it at the back of your mind that without the raw materials, you cannot process. Without raw materials, you cannot, manufacturing industry cannot produce anything. Therefore, those raw materials need to be extracted by some particular group of people who are engaged in that very economic activities. Therefore, the extractive occupation can also be seen as primary production, because in primary production, it says that it is the process of extracting the natural resources from the land or from the sea. We need natural resources. We need natural resources in our industries. Those natural resources need to be processed into another form. An example of extractive occupation is what? Farming. Therefore, farmers are involved in the process of extracting the natural resources from the soil. We have fishing, that is fishermen. We have mining, that is miners. We have hunting, and etc., etc. Now, the second class of an occupation is what we call it manufacturing occupation. What we are trying to say here is that there are people that are involved in the process of converting the raw materials extracted under the extractive occupation into finished good or semi-finished good. Theirs is to convert the raw materials into finished good, because the raw materials cannot give you direct or immediate satisfaction until they are being processed. In this case, there are a group of people who economic activities is involved in the conversion, the transformation, or the changing the real form of raw materials into finished goods. Example of manufacturing occupation are shoemaking. They change hides and skin into shoe. We also have food processing. We have bag making. We have weaving and industrial work, etc., etc. Now, the third classification or the class of an occupation is what we call it constructive occupation. Constructive occupation is concerned with all the activities of those who engage in assembling of goods manufactured into usable form. Goods being extracted under the extractive occupation cannot give you what? Cannot give you an immediate satisfaction. Let us consider the example of wood. The chairs that you are using in your classes, we have been assembled by some group of people. And those people, that is the kind of work they are doing because they have the skills. The carpenters, they have the skill to assemble it. The welders, they have the skills to assemble those raw materials into what? Into usable forms. They engage in constructing roads, bridges, houses, and so on. All the various components extracted and manufactured are converted into usable form. Example of constructive occupation include road construction. Road construction is an example of constructive occupation. We have welding, is an example of extractive occupation. So there are a group of people who are involved in that process, who put those things together for what? That can give you a direct satisfaction. That is their own work. That is how they earn their own living. Then the fourth classification of occupation is what we call it commercial occupation. Commercial occupation. This refers to all the people involved in the distributions of goods to those who need them. Remember, there is always a slogan in production which says that production is said not to be complete until what produced reach the hands of the final users. It means there was no production at all until what produced reached the hands of the final users. And there are some group of people who earn their own living by making sure that those goods are what? Are being distributed to where they are needed. It means those people make the life cycle of production to be completed. That is their own work. They earn their own living through that particular service. Example of commercial occupation are one, we have banking. We have transportation, transporter. Maybe if somebody is telling you that I am a transporter, don't think that it's not working. It's working. It's earning a living. He earned a living through that very word, through that work. We also have advertising, advertisers. That is their own work. They earn their living through that word, through that services they render to the member of the public. We have insurance. We even have traders. We have hawkers that take goods from one place to another. They make such goods available to the member of the public. When you see a young girl moving from one place to another, when you see a young boy moving from one place to another, telling you to buy this or buy that, that is the way they earn their own living. Then, the fourth classification of occupation is what we call it direct service. Learners, service is an intangible product. It's invisible. And there are people that earn their living through rendering what? Services to the member of the public. Direct service, this includes those economic activities involved in giving satisfaction, enjoyment, and rendering personal services to others. There are a group of people who involve in giving direct satisfaction, enjoyment to people, and they are being paid by those who enjoy their services. There are a group of people in our society today whose work are involved in rendering direct satisfaction or enjoyment. You are living in your house with your children. You need somebody to come and do some work for you. Example, you need somebody to come and be cooking for your family. Such a person is being considered, regarded known as a cook. He provides services to you and to your family. And at the end of the day, you will be the one to pay what? To pay the person. So when we are talking about direct service, we are simply talking about those who rendered services to the member of the public, and they are being paid by those who enjoy their what? Their services. We call it direct services. Example of direct services. We have family doctors. Family doctors. We have teachers in private organization, teachers in private school. If you are working in private school, you are not going to be paid by the government. Rather, you are going to be paid by the owner of the school. It means you are rendering a direct service to that very particular organization. If I employ you to work in my house as a cook, at the end of the month, I have to give you your reward. Or at the end of the day, I have to give you a reward. It means you are not going to be paid by the government. Rather, you are going to be paid by that person that employ you. Therefore, there are people who earn their living today through that means. They render direct services to the member of the public, and they are being paid by those who enjoy their services. The sixth one, we have indirect services. Indirect services include services rendered to the general public, but they are not paid by the members of the public directly. Indirect services include services rendered to the general public, but they are not paid for by the members of the public directly. What I am actually doing, I am a teacher in a public school. I render what? Indirect service. Indirect service, that service is to the member of the public. And it is not the member of the public that pays me. I am a good example. Teachers in public schools are a good example of what we call it indirect services. We are rendering services to the member of the public. And it is not the member of the public that will pay you for the service rendered. It is the government that will pay you for the service rendered. The government will pay from the taxes and levies paid by the public. However, those involved in rendering indirect services and are paid indirectly by the public includes medical doctors working in public hospitals. Medical doctors working in public hospitals. We have police force, we have civil servants, we have lawmakers, and so on. Therefore, the classification of occupation can be illustrated in form of a diagram as shown below. From all that we have discussed so far about the classification of occupation, we talk about the extractive occupation. As you can see, the example of extractive of occupation, that is farming, fishing, mining. We also talk about manufacturing, which is the conversion of raw materials into finished good or semi-finished good. You can see shoemaking, bag making, weaving. We also talk about constructive, directive, commercial, and indirect services. These are the classification or the classes of occupation. Now, from all that we have discussed so far, one, we talk about the meaning or what occupation is all about. And we define occupation as any legitimate activity engaged in by an individual in order to earn a living. We also went ahead and talked about the factors that determine the choice of occupation. Factors that determine the choice of occupation, and we talk about the climatic factor. We also talk about salaries and wages. We also talk about the natural resources. We also talk about government policy and so on. And we also talk about the classification of occupation. We talk about extractive. We talk about manufacturing. We talk about constructive. We talk about commercial direct. We talk about direct and indirect services. Now we have come to the end of our today's lesson. But before I go, I will want to give you an assignment that will keep you busy at home. Please take your pen and your paper and take this assignment. Number one, what is occupation? Number two, what are the factors people to be considered when choosing an occupation? Number three, with the aid of a diagram, show the different classes of occupation. Assignment one, I repeat, what is occupation? Two, what are the factors people to be considered when choosing an occupation? Three, with the aid of a diagram, show the different classes of productive occupation. For further studies, if you want to read at home and it's advisable for you to study on your own, you can go through the following books: Essential Commands for Senior Secondary School by G. Babalola and Comprehensive Commands for Senior Secondary School by U.A. Jensen. For inquiries, you can contact me, that is NYARI ZACHARIAH, from 08065694134, or you can contact my colleagues in the same field, Master Abbas Shehu, with this very contact number 08100127508, or Zainab Abdul Karim 08032847167. Stay home, stay safe, keep learning. COVID-19 is real.